6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. It's the newest thing to do. Stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. The distance between me and you. 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. And when I say I'll keep you very close to my heart, it's purely metaphorical. These times are quite historical. So step aside, let's live our lives 6 feet apart.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Sunday Night Stories, brought to you by 6 Feet Apart Productions. We're really excited for this week because we've got our Pride Loud and Proud show. All our storytellers are from the LGBTQ community. I find that very difficult to say, so I'll probably mess it up a bit later. So thank you, welcome, thank you for watching. Please send our storytellers some love by putting some comments in the chat. And hopefully we'll do a few call outs, tell us where you're watching from, who you know, who you're supporting, that sort of thing. Now, later in the programme, we're going to be announcing who's the winner of our lovely collectible 6 Feet Apart Productions mug. So anybody who bought a ticket will be in the draw for that, and we'll let you along the exciting news of that a bit later on. Now, while we were preparing for the show, I thought I'd find out a few bits of information I didn't know about Pride. So there's quite a lot of things I didn't know about Pride, actually. So I made myself some little note cards. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they disappear. So I'm going to tell you a few little bits that I didn't know. You probably find it all very simple because you might know. In 1978, Gilbert Baker designed the Pride flag, and it was hand-stitched by 30 volunteers. And then he assigned different meanings to each of the colours. And I didn't know this. So red means life, orange is healing, green is nature, indigo is serenity and harmony, and violet is spirit. Now, there were two extra colours, pink and turquoise, and they got removed for some practical, boring reason. I can't remember what it was now. But pink means sexuality and turquoise was magic and art. So because you haven't got the colours on the flag, I dyed my hair today. Well, my husband dyed my hair today, actually, to be honest. It's turquoise at the front and it's pink at the back, especially so that we can have the whole flag. And I've got my T-shirt as much as I can. A little bit Pride-like, but I'm making a little bit of an effort for you. Right, so on with the show. So now I'd like you to get comfortable, turn off your mobiles, get yourself a drink, settle down on the sofa or outside in the garden, wherever you are. All our stories tonight are true personal stories. They're not comedy sketches, they're not rants. We can't guarantee that we'll be totally without any cursing or bad language. So if you've got little ones around, just beware. Nothing too bad, but you never know. So just a slight warning. So our first storyteller tonight is a comedian, a storyteller, and an occasional actor. His television appearances have included Netflix, Oxygen's My Crazy Love, and National Geographic's Brain Games. And he was named Time Out New York's Queer Comics of Colour to Watch Out For. So there you have it. He's on our show. Now, I always like to get some funny little thing about people that they don't normally tell people, so that we can get to know them just a little bit better. So Calvin told me that when he's not sheltering in place in New York, he hosts speed dating, which I found fascinating because I once went to a speed dating in England and it was absolutely appalling and I never tried it again. But I think Calvin has a little bit more luck. Perhaps he's a little bit better at hosting than the person who was hosting my one was. He was also on a game show called Chain Reaction, and he and his team won $8,000, which enabled him, his chair, to move out of home. So that's really cool. So I'm very impressed. So please welcome him all the way from New York. It's Calvin Cato.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I was not prepared for you to mention the speed dating thing. So now I feel very flustered. And I officially apologize for anyone who's ever been on a speed date. I swear to everything. It's not my fault. It's the company's. Just have to give that as a disclaimer. So speaking of speed dating, this is actually a story that takes place in 2009. I don't know if you remember, that was when Barack Obama just got elected, so there was hope. And at the time, I was coming to terms with the fact that I was a gay man. And coming into my own as a gay adult, I was like, well, it's kind of a prerequisite to try to have, gay sex. So I was doing stand-up comedy at the time. I just started, and I happened to meet this comedian who, let's call him Greg because his real name is Mike. And so I met Greg Mike, and he seemed very nice, very lovely guy. You know, he seemed stable, had all of his teeth. And he said, hey, you know, like, I really like you. And, you know, I want to help you, you know, come to terms with yourself. And I was like, well, to be honest, like, I really haven't had full gay sex before. Would you want to have full gay sex with me? That sounds not romantic. I asked it in much better terms. I wasn't like, hey, sign this contract, please. It was a very much more of a, I would like to try anal. Thank you very much. So, so we decide to go on a date. We go on a proper date to Max Brenner, which is this famous like chocolate restaurant, which, word of advice, don't do chocolate before anal. It's a hell of a Hershey highway. Don't do it. But we did that. We had this date. It was very lovely. And then he's like, hey, can you come back to my place and we will have the gay sex that we talked about. So we go, and I get to his place. And here's the thing is that we start to have sex, and he's wearing a t-shirt during sex, which I did not know that you were allowed to do that. But it's a Simpsons t-shirt that he's wearing. And it's not just a Simpsons t-shirt. It's a picture of Ralph Wiggum's face with "me fail English, that's impossible." And so that is what I stared at for my first encounter, which I'm sure you can all imagine is a very jarring way to be ushered into the world of queerness. So we had this awkward experience, but otherwise it was lovely and great and fine. And then we actually go out to, like, officially we're together for like a month, and then we break up. He dumps me. And I said, you know what, this is fine, because I was just in it for the gay sex, and that's over. And he saw that I was too happy. So he said, oh, no, can we go back out? And I took him back. And then he dumped me again. And that was when I was like, no. I can't be dumped twice. The problem is I've only had sex with one guy. And I was like, what I need to do is have sex with another guy. And that will help me to win, because I wanted to win this breakup, you know? And I wanted him to know that I was over him. Because I feel like you just put that out in the universe. You know, it's like, you know how dogs can smell cancer? I just feel like exes can smell new dick, and they just know that you moved on. So I decide I'm going to find a guy. But again, I'm new to the world. How do I find gay guys? And so I had to look the old-fashioned way, Craigslist. And not proud. This is back when Craigslist had a personal section that got a little too personal. So I put up an ad on Craigslist to look for a guy. I made it very tasteful. I thought it was very nice and classy. And I didn't put my face in the picture because no face, no case. So I like had the ad up. I waited, you know, some responses poured in. And then I got a response from this guy who he said, I'm a chef. He seemed very nice. He had no roommates. And we had like a nice like back and forth and a nice rapport. And he said, hey, okay, if you want, we can meet up and we'll hook up. And I said, okay, let's meet up in public, because I've seen Dateline. I'm not going to go missing. I want to meet up in public. So we decide to meet up at this like very nice bar where I go and I sit down, and he sits down, and he looks very handsome. Like he looks like as good as his pictures. He's like very tall, 6'4", very lovely, wonderful guy. And he says, hey, do you want a drink? And I said, yeah, sure. I'll take a beer. So he buys himself a beer and buys me a beer, which I'm 24 at the time. So I was like, you have money to buy 2 drinks at once? What is this? So I was very flattered. So he brings his 2 beers back, and I sit and I start sipping my beer, and he drinks the beer and slams it down, like finishes the entire beer in 5 seconds. And I'm like, that's weird. And then he says, do you want another beer? And I said, oh, no, I'm fine. I'm still working on this one. And he says, I'll get you another beer. So he gets a beer for himself and a beer for me, drinks the second beer and slams it down. And now I'm a little concerned because I'm like, is everything okay? And he goes, there's something I didn't mention when we were chatting back and forth before. I just want you to know that like I have a thing in my past. And I'm like, that's fine. Like we all have pasts. And he said, well, to be honest, like I was recently in jail. And I don't judge. I went to Wesleyan. I've learned not to judge. I don't know everyone's walks of life. It's fine. But I asked, what did you go to jail for? And then he says, so there was a thing with someone underage. That's a concern. Also, air quotes underage, which sounds worse than just saying underage. Can we all agree on that? That's crazy. So I pause because I now have to contemplate where the next step is going to be. And I decide to just say, well, I am 24. I don't know why I thought that would diffuse the situation, but that's all I said. And then we just moved on to other things. We just acted like that never happened. We kept chatting. Things were lovely and fine and great, aside from the, thing. And he's like, hey, do you want to come home with me? Do you feel safe? And I said, you know what? I feel safe. I'm going to do this. And so I go home with him, and he lives very far away. So this is already another kind of red flag. You know what I mean? Like, they teach you not to go to a second location, but that's what I just did. So I have now gone to his apartment, which is very, very far away from anything. And I live in New York City, so there's public transportation, but this is like at least a mile away from any public transportation. And I get to his place, and I see his apartment, and I walk in, and he is a hoarder, like a full, like there are literally boxes everywhere and newspapers stacked up like high up to the ceiling. It was like to the point where like I kept hearing a cat, but to this day, I never saw that cat. I don't know where Mittens is, but I was like, I already committed to this and I needed to win this breakup. So I'm going to sleep with this guy. So I ended up sleeping with this guy anyway. And it was a lovely time. It was great. Clearly I survived. And we finish. And then afterwards he says, oh, since I'm a chef, do you want to try some of my soup? And I said, I guess. And so he brings out gazpacho. And so now I'm sitting in his bed, cross-legged and naked, eating gazpacho. And I really have to wonder what went wrong with my life at this point, that this is happening. So I'm now trying to plan an exit strategy. And the way I get out of it is that he says, oh, you mentioned you do stand-up comedy. Do you know what my favorite stand-up is? The Big Bang Theory. And that's when I decide, okay, this is my out. I'm going to leave. I'm not going to watch Big Bang Theory with you. I'm going to go. And then he says, oh, I know you live really far away. Do you need some money? And I said, no, don't worry about it. And he goes, no, you need to take a cab. Here's $50. And again, as a 24-year-old, $50 is $500. So I was like, $50? Oh my God. And then he asked, do you want to call a cab? And I said, no, I'll call the cab from downstairs. And would you believe I walked a mile to that nearest train station and pocketed that $50? And I got home and I treated myself to a very nice ice cream. And I felt like a winner. And I felt like Mike knew that I had won the breakup. Thank you very much.
Fantastic story. I love it. And that poor cat. That's so funny. Thank you so much, Calvin. That's a brilliant, excellent story. So before we go into our next storyteller, I have going to take a little drink. I bought a special Pride cup. So I'm just have a little bit drink for you. And then we get on to our next bit of Pride facts, which I know you're gagging for. In 1958, the first gay leather bar opened in the United States in Chicago. So two of our people are from Chicago. So I don't know what it's called, but maybe you should go there. And then in 1959, in the UK, we had our first gay TV drama called South. Not quite sure why it's called South. And then in 1971, the Alice B. Toklas Club, which I've actually been to Alice B. Toklas Street, which apparently I Googled is nowhere near the club, which is kind of weird. And that was founded in San Francisco for the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender community. I like that one because I thought I'd been there, but near it and I hadn't. So there we go. Right then, our next storyteller is from Chicago. So go to the gay leather bar, that's what I say. She's the founding co-host of Outspoken, which is an LGBTQ storytelling, when we're not sheltering in place, of course. And it's held at the Sidetrack in Chicago. This person is someone who believes deeply in the power of stories, advocacy, and a great pair of shoes. So who doesn't believe in great shoes? Only when you get to a certain age, they've got to be great, comfortable shoes. Now, this person's funny story was when she was 5, she wanted to be like Evel Knievel. So she's a bit of a daredevil. So she rode her tricycle right off her grandparents' porch and face planted in the ground. The result was she had a missing front tooth for an entire year. So we do hope it's, will all be mended now. So please welcome our second storyteller, Kim L. Hunt.
Thank you for that. I have both teeth in the front. So I had no idea that I would be able to fulfill a lifelong dream when I agreed to be a part of bringing the gay games to Chicago. When I was barely out, a coworker invited me to a meeting on a Saturday, an all-day meeting, and I didn't have anything else to do, so I went. The meeting was in an office downtown, and I quickly learned that it was one of the first meetings to put together the proposal to bring the gay games to Chicago in 2006. I had no idea what the gay games were. And it was 1999. So why the hell were these people planning so far ahead? As the day progressed, I realized that the gay games was kind of a big deal, especially for the many white, mostly white, I should say, gay men who could afford to travel the globe every 4 years for a sports and culture festival that was modeled after the Olympics. And to be fair, many of the planning activities were initiated by a ragtag group of individuals who in various cities across the world over many years had really decided to come together and beat their competition and convince business leaders and civic leaders to invest time and resources and facilities to accommodate 12 to 15,000 queer and trans people who came to the Gay Games for this 10-day festival. Now, like I said, I didn't know what the Gay Games were, but from that moment, that weekend until really the next year or so, I was involved in putting together the logistics part of the bid package because my background was transportation. And there were many meetings with the mayor of Chicago and his staff and many other decision makers. And I was part of the team that hosted the selection committee for the Federation of Gay Games. Yes, there is a Federation of Gay Games. And we learned after this 2-day selection or site visit that involved us traveling across the city to 24, 26 different facilities. A few months later, the decision was made. Chicago was one of maybe 4 or 5 cities that was going to be able to come do an in-person presentation to the Federation meeting in the fall. That meeting was going to be in Johannesburg, South Africa. I had always wanted to go to Africa. I was born a few years before the 1968 race riots that were precipitated by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. And I don't really remember the riots at all, but I do remember just having this sense of tension in the air for a good part of my growing up. And I remember the Black Panther Party, and I remember Black consciousness. And I remember James Brown's Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud song. And I also remember the original Roots TV special that was the story of Alex Haley's family who from current times back to his first relative who was brought to America as an enslaved African, Kunta Kinte. And there was no VCR, there was no TiVo, there was no streaming services. So my family rearranged their schedule every single day so that we could be in front of the television from the opening credits to the closing credits for the entire run of the series. And that series really, for many Black Americans, sort of changed their relationship with Africa. And I remember even in my small circle in Kansas City, Missouri, people talking about going back to the motherland to visit and reconnect. And here I was, many, many years later, going to be able to do that. So in 2001, there were no direct flights from Chicago to Johannesburg. Some of us, our delegation flew out of New York, and some of us, myself included, flew out of Atlanta. And in the 2 or 3 hours between flights, I had the chance to really think about the fact that I was about to be on a 21-hour flight, flying across the Atlantic Ocean. Of course, I was terrified. but I was determined to make this trip. And once we got on the plane and got settled, there was also this reality check. We were traveling 3 weeks after 9/11, and there were like 40 people on a plane that was built to carry about 400. So of course we had the plane pretty much to ourselves, and there were a few other members of other city delegations going to the Federation meeting as well. Thank God for the free alcohol that's on international flights. I came to really appreciate South African wine from the very first sip. And in my sober moments, and also in the weeks leading up to the trip, I really thought about, what am I going to feel like when I step onto the continent? Because it's a big deal for a Black American to go anywhere in Africa. So, I was contemplating, am I going to feel like this jolt of electricity from the moment my feet touch the ground? Am I going to feel some kind of connection? Am I going to feel some kinship with the people? What is it that is going to happen to me from the moment I land? So the plane touches down and it's taxiing to the area where the planes stop. I learned that not all planes go to a gate. So the wheels were rolled up to us, and I'm looking out the window and I'm waiting for my turn of 40 people to get out of this big ass plane. And I'm at the top of the stairs, and it's hot as hell when I step out, and I go down the stairs, getting ready to touch the ground, nothing. I feel nothing. In fact, it was a very westernized experience for me. The hotel that we were staying in was outside of Johannesburg and was attached to this really big mall, the biggest shopping mall I have ever seen in my life. I am a shopper. I was not mad at that at all. But the whole experience was very white and also very suburban for me. Plus, I spent a lot of time in meetings and rehearsals for our presentation, so I really didn't get to see much of the country. To top it off, Chicago did not win the bid. Montreal did, but there's a silver lining. Years later, Montreal and the Federation couldn't work things out, and the games eventually came to Chicago, but we didn't know that at the time. So I'm disappointed for many reasons regarding the trip, but I am determined somehow, some way, I'm going to come back. Didn't know how, but I really wanted to check out the country and give it another chance in my mind. So I was actually able to make it happen 2 years later. I had decided to go back to school for a second master's degree. Don't recommend that, but I did that. And as my first year was winding down, I even thought that I wanted to go on to get a PhD. And I felt like if I was going to do that, I needed to have a kick-ass internship or some type of research project. And I was able to apply for funding for a summer internship that I could create myself. And I figured, since I was creating an internship for myself, why not go back to South Africa? So I was able to do that. And the internship or the scholarship decision maker said, yep, sounds like a great idea, go for it. And I reached out to friends of friends of friends and connected with the director of the Department of Transport in KwaZulu-Natal, which is the office is located in Pietermaritzburg, South Africa, near Durban. And I was going to work on a project that looked at the transport department's transit system and its fares policy and its impact on Black people in South Africa. And my supervisor had made arrangements for me to stay at a bed and breakfast near the office. And I arrived at the B&B with my supervisor. And as we're talking about the arrangements and the price and all of that, we met with our my host family, I guess you could call it, and they were white South Africans of British descent. who were three generations in the country. And their houseman, James, took my things out of the car and was taking them into the bedroom as we were talking. And when we finished, I joined him in the bedroom as he was putting my things up. He turns around and smiles at me and starts speaking in words I don't understand. And I smile at him and say, I'm sorry, I only speak English. And so thinking that maybe he's not articulating clearly, I guess he continues to talk and smile. And I smile and continue to say, I only speak English. I'm so sorry, I don't understand what you're saying. And after a few iterations of this, my hostess comes in and says some words in James's native language, and he smiles at me and he leaves, and I settle in for the night. And when I get up the next morning, the hostess and I are talking, and she tells me that James didn't understand how I could be Black and not be Zulu like him, and how I couldn't understand him. And she told him that I was from overseas, and he didn't understand that. And so she told him that I was from America, and he still didn't understand. So she tells him that I am a descendant of people who were brought to America and forced to work for free. And while he still thought overseas was the name of the place that I came from, he totally understood what it meant to be forced to work for free. She assured me that he was not working for free for her, but apparently it was an experience in his life. And I think I thought of that experience in that time as just like the craziest comedy I could ever think of, and still think of it sometimes that way today, but also in other ways, because here was this white woman explaining the transatlantic slave trade to a Black man in Africa who is trying to understand how this Black woman can be in Zululand and not be Zulu and pay this white woman to cook her meals and provide her with a place to stay and have her room cleaned. It was really weird. And one of many weird experiences around race in South Africa, but I really came to appreciate the joy around one, being recognized as an American, but also this sense of belonging at the same time. And I remember one day walking through a market area and stopping at the corner to wait for the light to change so I could cross the street. And a young Black man stood next to me, also waiting for the light to change. And he leaned over to me as the light turned green and said, "Welcome home, sister." And I had never felt anything as powerful as that in America. And while in South Africa, I had the experience of going to cultural institutions that were trying to figure out how to tell the story about the country, and left exhibits blank because the curators were struggling with how to tell a more inclusive story. And I also experienced the joy of knowing that LGBTQ people were included in South Africa's constitution as a protected group, unlike here in America. And also the sort of self-consciousness of traveling outside of the major cities with my partner as we were looking at other parts of the country. And I think back on that trip in this moment in America and think about all the visible ways that people were learning about race and reconciling with the history of the country 10 years, less than 10 years really, after apartheid's fall. And that struggle and that recognition that change needs to happen is something that really resonates with me in this moment of racial uprising in America, even in LGBTQ communities. And I have to say that that really gives me hope for America. So happy Pride.
Thank you, Kim. That's a great story. Thank you. And let's hope we do have a bit of hope in our country. We need it. We need it, definitely. Okay, so on to some more fascinating facts about Pride. In 1966, Lily Vincenz was the first lesbian to appear, her face would appear on the cover of The Ladder, which was, I think it was a lesbian publication. In 1972, Hawaii was the first state to decriminalize homosexuality. And in 1993, New York held its first annual Dyke March. So that's some nice little facts for you. So our next storyteller is, he works with Kim in Chicago, and he's the curator of Outspoken LGBTQ stories at Sidetrack. He's also a two-time winner of the Moth Grand Slam, sorry. So that's quite an achievement, let me tell you. He's also the co-producer at Story Jam and a member of the collective Drinkers with Writing Problems. And I want to join that group, please. I have a lot of writing problems and I'm just not doing it. So I think I'm going to come and join. So he also hates milk. Actually, I don't like milk either. So excellent. We can just drink South African wine, maybe. And since he was 8, he's learned how to dump it out behind his mum's back. Also, when he was 8, just got to get it, he was chased by a rooster, possibly a bit like this. And since then, it's understandably made him a little bit terrified of mascots. So I'm hoping I'm not going to scare him too much. And our next speaker, all the way from Chicago, is Archy Jamjun.
Hi, everyone. I want to say, if you want to hear Outspoken, we have a podcast too. So Google that. That's all I have to say there. So like every red-blooded American boy growing up in the 80s, I sang The Greatest Love of All by Whitney Houston around the house constantly. And one day my mother found out and it changed my life forever. See, I was in the kitchen singing, just being myself, when my mother's voice came up from behind me. Archie, what song is that? It's called The Greatest Love of All by Whitney Houston. Oh my God, Archie, that is the song. Oh my God, Archie, that is the song. My mother meant that I should sing The Greatest Love of All by Whitney Houston at our temple's upcoming but sadly misspelled children's talent show, Tinkle Tinkle Little Star. Now, we had been through a few songs. My mother said that Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer had a hero complex, and besides, this was a summer. It was simply unethical, she said, to sing We Are the World as a solo act. And when I tried to sing Thai songs, my mother told me that my enunciation of her mother tongue might lead some people to think that I have special needs. And besides, she said, The Greatest Love of All had this beautiful message about dignity, and how could I not share that with the world? So she told me to go to the living room where we would practice. And so I followed my mother, and she sat down on the floral print couch next to my father, who was reading a newspaper. I dug my toes into the shagreen carpeting and took a deep breath. I believe the children are future. I can do a verse. But then I got to the part where Whitney starts her vocal gymnastics. The greatest love of all. It did not go well. My usually stoic father put his newspaper down and glared at me. What he doing? Don't worry, Daddy. We just practicing Archie new song. It's called The Best Love in the World. And it's a song about protecting your dignity. My sister, who was 10 at the time, ran into the room screaming, Oh my God, what is Archie doing? What are you guys doing here? You're gonna make him what? You're gonna make him what? Mom, you cannot have Archie sing Whitney Houston. Little boys do not sing Whitney Houston, especially little boys who cannot sing. I don't think I should sing this song, I said. Mommy, maybe my son can just do a little dance. Somehow my mom managed to look all three of us in the eyes at one time. Archie gonna sing The Best Love in the World. The best love in the world is the best song in the world. And Archie gonna win the competition 100%. My fate was sealed. I practiced the greatest love of all for the next 2 weeks. My father hid it in the bedroom, and my sister renamed me Chinky Houston. Blinded and deaf by her love for me, my mother became the Helen Keller of stage moms. Oh, my son voice so beautiful. It sounded like the angels sing down from heaven. I, however, was more firmly planted in reality. And in a desperate attempt to save my life, I wrote Whitney Houston at her fan club. Dear Whitney Houston, my name is Archy Jamjun and I'm 8 years old. My mom's gonna make me sing the greatest love of all at our temple. I am not good. Please come sing for me. It's at our temple this Saturday. I'll see you then. I love you so much, Archie. I put the letter in an envelope, stole a stamp from my mom's purse and put it in the mailbox. Whitney had a whole 5 days to get back to me. The day of the competition arrived and I had not heard from Whitney. I sat in the audience and watched other kids perform. Someone did Mary Had a Little Lamb. Someone did the Pledge of Allegiance. Of course, it was an Asian competition, so someone did math equations on a chalkboard while playing the violin. But it suddenly occurred to me that nobody else had the humongous task of covering Whitney Houston. The room went from warm to hot. My eyes instinctively searched for a way out. I found one and I bolted. But my mother caught up to me and grabbed me by the arm. Where are you going? Anywhere but there, I said, pointing at the stage. Archie, don't be selfish. Don't be scared. You have to share the best love in the world with the people. Let them know their dignities. And then she took me backstage where she held me in place like a prison guard until the MC called my name. And now Archy Jamjun will sing, he will sing The Best Love in the World by Whitney Houston. I refused to move. I refused to move and she pushed me first. I fell onto the stage and she picked me up, carried me sideways and plopped me in front of the microphone. I waited for the music to begin. And then I waited some more. And then I realized for the grand occasion this was supposed to be, my mom forgot one small detail. We had no music. I was gonna sing The Greatest Love of All a cappella. I looked into the audience where my father was looking down at the ground. My sister was pointing and laughing at me. And when I looked at my mom, all I saw was this: just sing. You have to sing. I could feel my anus crown. The whirling blades of a helicopter distracted me from my butthole, and Whitney Houston came crashing through the ceiling, elegantly grasping a cable. As the dust settled, none of it landed on her, and she came up the aisle in a beautiful white sequins gown. Her hair was pushed up with baby's breath. Her makeup was provocative, yet somehow appropriate for a children's talent show at a Thai Buddhist temple. She came onto the stage and took my hand into hers. Are you gonna sing for me? No, Archie, we're gonna do this together. And we did. Whitney started, of course, but soon I was matching her note for note and gesture for gesture. When we were done, the audience erupted into cheers. My dad started a standing ovation and my sister was shocked and horribly jealous. And then I looked over at my mom and she had a look in her eye that I've never seen since. And I've heard no Asian child has really ever seen. I had exceeded my mother's expectations. No. Maybe I just stood there and then I stood there some more. And I just kept standing there until I burst into tears and ran over to my mother. As I wept into her midsection, I wept not with the success of sharing the best love in the world with the world, but with the stank of defeat and failure. I looked up at my mother and she said, "Don't worry, Archie. Mommy always loved you." Now, my mom and I do not always see eye to eye about my life. She wishes I were a doctor. I wish I was married to a doctor or someone even richer. But no matter what we go through, we still love each other. Even if we embarrass each other, we love each other. And I just know that, especially in our community, that's something that we take for granted. Because love, to me, is the best thing in the world. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, Archie, that's a really great story. I love it. I love it. It was so funny. Oh, and your mum sounds hilarious. So you might be wondering what I'm doing. I just thought, well, I might go to a Pride march after this, even if it's just around my living room. Now, obviously, because I'm near San Francisco, I'm a bit flower powerish, but I don't really know. I don't really care. And I'm going to do another one. This is also what I thought would be a really fun thing to do for Pride. So just out there and fabulous. Now, before we introduce our next person, I'm going to try and read my next facts through my flashing glasses. So let's see how we get on. In 1973, Jim Morris became the first openly gay bodybuilder to win Mr. America. And in 1985, and I remember this, the Liverpool-based soap opera called Brookside, which is Brookie, sometimes how it's known in England, had its first open gay character. And in 1994, and I remember this very clearly, it was a huge deal. There was the first pre-watershed, which meant before 9 p.m. at night, lesbian kiss. And I remember that. And it made all the newspapers as if it was like the biggest thing since I don't know what. So there you go. That's some facts for you now. Now, the next person, you might recognize her. She's been on our program a few times because, well, you'll just find out in a minute. She's a comedian, an award-winning storyteller, and a writer. Now, she was born and raised in a place called Normal, which is obviously what I'm looking at the moment. But her life has seemed far from it. In fact, her life is so filled with causes that she came up with her own logo to redefine what it means to be normal, because she's a Democrat, she's a lesbian, she's a Catholic, she's a special needs parent, she's an MS warrior, and a suburban soccer mum. I mean, God almighty, what else is there? And so she's got this amazing logo that you can see, and hopefully she'll explain it a little bit more to you, or talk to you about it when she comes on. So please welcome my co-producer for 6 Feet Apart, Regina Stoops.
Thank you. Thank you, Claire. Thank you. You're putting a very ab-fab spin on gay pride, Claire. Thank you. So it's June 26th, 2015, and a friend of mine comes up and says, "Great day." And I'm like, yeah, have a great day. She's like, no. Today is a great day. And I realized she's talking about the Supreme Court ruling legalizing same-sex marriage. And while I know this is a really big historic event, I'm really so busy at that moment being not legally married that it hadn't really occurred to me what it meant to be legally married in every state of the United States. In fact, now I could do a cross-country road trip and I'd be legal from coast to coast, although there were a lot of states with which I would not want to hang the pride flag out the window, but still, it was legal in every state. And I laughed and I thought about all the ceremonies that I'd had over the years, and not because I've had like all these different relationships. It's just that, you know, they kept changing the rules. So we always had to have another ceremony. My first ceremony was in 1980 at a YMCA camp with my best friend, Laura. And, you know, we were young and crazy, and it was a Sadie Hawkins dance, and we just got carried away and all the kids were doing it. So we were married down at the waterfront by the waterfront director, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't legal. But to be clear also that this relationship was never consummated, okay? But Laura and I are good friends to this day. So flash forward many years, many girlfriends, and I met the one. And unlike 1980, this was the 90s, and I knew this was the one for the long haul. I had met Diane, the love of my life. And we decided we wanted to be married. Now, of course, we couldn't be legally married, but we wanted to have some sort of ceremony that would show our friends and any family who were willing to show up that we were committed for life. Now, this ceremony looked most like a real wedding in that it had caterers and flowers and music and a reception hall and a DJ and my parents walked me down the aisle, and it was just like a real wedding, except, I mean, for that part where it wasn't legal and the fact that there were 2 brides. But other than that, totally the same. Well, okay, at the reception, the guys were the better dancers than the women. Okay, so that was a little bit different. And then we had to make a beer run in the middle of the reception because we totally underestimated the lesbian softball contingent and just how much beer they could drink. So, but other than that, totally like a real wedding. And we felt married. We felt different. We felt that we were really committed to each other. So fast forward to 2003, and we were legal domestic partners in California. Okay, so we didn't really have a ceremony, but we got this really nice certificate and had a nice gold seal stamped by the Secretary of the State of California. And it gave us some legal standing. We could now file joint state income taxes, and we could visit each other in the hospital and have conjugal visits in prison, I guess, if it came to that. And we qualified for each other's employee health insurance. So, it was progress. It was something, but, it still didn't solve the question of what box do I check on the form? I mean, single, married, divorced. There was not a box for domesticated. And I still felt like those kids at Thanksgiving that get put at that other table, like we were included, but we weren't really included. Then came 2008 in California, and we could get legally married for real in the state of California. Only by that time, Diane and I had 3 kids under the age of 5. And we were so busy being not legally married that we barely had time to get legally married. In fact, if we hadn't been able to get a babysitter, I'm pretty sure we would have never made it to the courthouse. But we did, and we were legally married. Now, shortly after that came Proposition 8, which was where a referendum for all the people that wanted to overturn gay marriage in California. And it passed. Yes, on 8, it passed. So now we weren't married, or were we? We didn't know. Apparently, if you got married, you were still married, but nobody else could get married. So we were like this special tribe of wedded homosexuals in California. We had our own little club going on there. And it didn't change much in my life day to day. Prop 8 being passed, it didn't change much until the day my 5-year-old son looked at me and he said, how come those mean people with the yes on 8 stickers, how come they don't think mommies and mommies should be married? Well, it's okay to yank me back and forth in the ping pong legal marriage game. But then when my son got involved, then I realized I was going to have to shake off my indifference and do something about it. And what we did wasn't very revolutionary. I mean, come on, we had 3 kids under the age of 5. It was really hard at that moment to think about starting a whole protest movement. But what we did was we lived our life in our community in a very open way. We took every opportunity to show that we were just like every other married couple in town. We were out at the schools, volunteering at the Catholic Church, doing all the things that married couples do. And by doing that, we felt that we were making a statement about our life and about our legality being together. So that brings us to the here and now. We're still legally married. We haven't ruined the institution of marriage. In fact, that seemed like a whole lot of work to ruin the institution of marriage. I didn't have time for that. And it really seemed like there's a lot of reality TV stars like the Kardashians that could do a much better job of ruining the institution of marriage. So, we just took a pass on that and just lived our life. So here we are. It's 2020. We are still legally married, although there's this little piece of me that always thinks they might just take it away. But we're here, we're queer, we're married. And I have to say that my son, he had a comment about that when I said that we were now legally married for real. And he laughed and he said, I think people have been watching that show, Modern Family. And, the gays on that show are really funny. So I think more people like the gays now. So that might be the case, or maybe it's just that love conquered all. I'm not sure. But regardless, I am greatly thankful and very appreciative of my marriage. I don't take it for granted. And I'm appreciative of everybody who worked hard to get same-sex marriage legalized. And I'd like to raise a glass to them and thank them. And then I got to go make dinner for those 3 kids. So thank you very much. Thanks for coming to the Pride Show.
Yeah, great story. Thank you, Regina. Thank you. Love it. And I'm so happy. And I'll raise a glass to you too and to your same-sex marriage. All for everybody. Now, I have definitely gone full ab fab now. Full ab fab for the Pride, which I think is fine. We can go ab fab for the Pride. So a couple more little things to facts, little factoids to tell you about Pride, and then we get on to our final storyteller. In 1997, Ellen DeGeneres came out as a lesbian on the Oprah Winfrey Show. I didn't know that. And she was the first open lesbian to host the Academy Awards a full decade later in 2007. Love me some Ellen. In 1999, Georgina Beyer was the first transsexual member of parliament in the UK. See? The UK, we're doing it. And in 2000, the transgender pride flag was created by Monica Helms and was first shown at a pride parade in Phoenix, Arizona. Fascinating stuff, eh? Okay, so our last storyteller tonight is a bisexual comedian who is brutally honest and uniquely clever. She talks about life experiences and self-discovery, touching on everything from family, drugs, co-workers, sexuality, and even the terrible sin of a misspelled tattoo. She's performed at the Comedy Store, Punchline, Tommy T's, and many more in New York. Well, I don't think they're all in New York, actually. So her funny fact was she grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I didn't understand that. I didn't understand the funny fact. Everybody else laughed. I didn't know. And apparently it was not until she moved to the Bay Area that she realized that she was not Hispanic. So please give a huge Bay Area welcome to Shay Bell.
There, everybody. Yes, my name is Shay Bell, and my story realized how much my family does not know about LGBTQ community or me being queer. It kind of happened accidentally, if you will, over Thanksgiving one year. Thanksgiving in my family is like a huge tradition. You know, it's like a great opportunity for our family to get together and break bread, if you will, and spend time together. And there's, you know, maybe sometimes 20, 25 people. And even after like Thanksgiving, we've eaten all our dinner and we've watched all the movies and done all the games and all that together, because we actually play games, believe it or not. And they get quite competitive. We actually end up spending the night together. So it turns into like a huge family sleepover. And so I had been in a relationship with my girlfriend for a couple of years and decided that I was going to, you know, go ahead and bring her to Thanksgiving as a way to kind of introduce her, but not introduce her. I didn't want to, you know, make a big to-do about, oh, you know, this is my girlfriend. I'm going to introduce her as such, but I'm not going to make an announcement prior to. And there was a series of interesting conversations that took place as a result of me bringing her. And so I'll share with you that. So we go to Thanksgiving at my mom's house, and my mom lives in Sacramento. And we get to the house, and you know, everybody's starting to arrive, and you know, maybe an hour or so in, when you know most of the family is there, I start, you know, taking her around and just start introducing her to a number of family members, you know, cousins and aunts and uncles and my brother and niece and nephew and everybody, and just say, hey, you know, hey, Eric, you know, my brother, this is Phoenicia, my girlfriend. And of course, there are some reactions I expected, which was no reaction at all. And then there was some other reactions that I kind of expected, but was taken aback by the questions that followed. About an hour after me taking my girlfriend around to the family and making sure that she was introduced to everybody, one of my aunts, who was actually visiting us from Alabama, came over to me, and the reason why I preface where she's from, because I think it's important based on the questions that follow. so she comes over, we're sitting on the couch and she comes over and just kind of blatantly looks at both of us in this weird way. I don't know if it was the alcohol. She had had a couple cocktails by then. And she just looks at both of us, you know, while she's sipping her drink, and she just says, so who's the boy? Right? Now, I'll be honest, I hadn't heard anything like this before. When she asked me the question, I think a part of me felt a little dumber. You know what I mean? I felt like, wait a minute, did I just hear that right? You know, I want to maintain my cool. So I just skated over that and act like I didn't hear her. But then I wanted to play with her a little bit because I knew she had had some alcohol. So I just looked at her, you know, and I just said, nobody. No, nobody's the boy. That's the point of being in a gay relationship, you know. I don't know if she got it because, again, she's probably intoxicated at this point. She carried on with another question. Like, we look like we want to be drilled with more questions. And she just said, well, who takes out the trash then? I thought that was ridiculous. Like, what do you mean who takes out the trash? What? It's, you know, the first thing that I thought was like, I just started thinking of like those old mafia movies when they talk about taking out the trash and that's like referring to a dead body. And I'm like, it's just garbage. What are you talking about? You know, I said, you know, auntie, you need to maybe go sit down. You know, looks like you've had a few cocktails. This is getting out of hand, you know. I don't know if she was further confused by me not answering, because she then, you know, continued on. She was like wanting now to explain it to me because she thinks I'm confused now, right? And she's like, no. What I need to know, what I'm asking is, are you coming or are you going? Okay, now I'm like, okay, it's definitely the alcohol because this doesn't make any sense, right? I kept thinking, does she think I'm disoriented? Where is this coming from, you know? After a few more questions like that, I left her alone. You know, she kind of continued her cocktails. Who am I to spoil a good Thanksgiving drunk session? You know what I mean? So I just left her alone and I went about my business. Around this time, it's time, you know, we're going to start breaking open the desserts. You know, one of my aunts is really famous for making peach cobbler, and we all can't wait for that moment. So everybody's like gathering around the table. So we kind of have another coming together moment. And now one of my other cousins who, you know, I don't know if you have a cousin. There's always a weird one. There's always a weird cousin who somehow you think like maybe he would try to hit on you if he wasn't related to you. It was that time of the night, okay? Because right after people start like, you know, divvying up the peach cobbler, I guess he's feeling himself or something. And he's one of those guys who, you know, he's had like fantasies of being with two women. So he kind of comes over to the table and he like comes over to our side of the table and he like leans on the chair kind of and gets real comfortable, like just too comfortable. Like, okay, where are we going with this now, right? So he looks at me and just completely ignores the fact that there's someone standing next to me. And my girlfriend's actually standing there next to me. And he just comes at me and he says, so cuz, you know, you've been with both a man and a woman. So tell me, what's the difference? You know, I didn't really know how to take that. First of all, I'm not going to answer that question right in front of my girlfriend. That's going to leave me on the couch for the next 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Who's going to fall for that trap, right? But I want to play with him now because, again, everybody's alcohol level is up here. I'm like, you know what? Let's just have some fun with it. So I just wanted to jab at him a little bit because I thought the question was really silly, you know, and I just started talking to him like he was an infant, actually, you know, and I was like, well, Jerome, I don't know if you know this or not. The difference between boys and girls is that one has an innie, okay? And then I looked him right in his face and I was like, and the other one's a dick. I hope I didn't offend anybody. I'm queer. I can say fag. I love you all. Thank you so much.
Excellent. It's such an excellent way to finish somebody off there, Shay. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. So yes, I do feel very ab-fab. And obviously, what's the point of having one feather boa when you can have two, darling? Two feather boas. So obviously, doubly fabulous. I'll have another drink, shall I? So I want to just give a shout out to some of the people in our chat tonight. So we've got Tony Magna. Hello, Tony. How are you? We've got Sue. We've got Kathy Catano. Now, I'd like to be very exciting now because we're going to announce the winner of our 6 feet of Pete mug by Only Don't Break It. And that is Kathy Catano. So we know you're there, so you can't escape. You have to have the mug. We'll get hold of you and we will send it to you whizzing along in the mail. We call it the post in England, but in the mail. Hopefully it'll be quicker than it sometimes is, because sometimes it takes a long time. Okay, next week we'll be taking things down. Probably won't be quite so ab-fabby, because we're going to have a Black Lives Matter show with stories from amazing storytellers from all over the country. It's going to be a totally African-American show, and these are people who make their living telling stories. So there's Diane Follett, Kirk Waller, Sheila Arnold, can't say anything today, Sheila Arnold and Wayne Harris. So they're going to be our storytellers. And the MC is not going to be me, you'll be relieved to hear. It's going to be Chris Williams, who is the producer of The Moth in Berkeley. So this show is going to be offered completely free. It's going to be something that we just wanted to do to get to amplify voices of color. So we're going to offer that free. So come back to the YouTube station, maybe click the little subscribe button and then you'll get notified. But we'll do it at 6 o'clock next Sunday. So that's all we have time for. So now what I'd like to do is bring back all our fabulous storytellers tonight to say goodbye. So thank you very much and goodbye to Calvin Cato.
Thank you so much for having me. And this is the best Patsy and Adina I've ever seen. I love it. I love it.
As a massive compliment. Thank you very much. And then thank you to Kim L. Hunt.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy Pride, everybody.
Yes, happy Pride. Thank you. Archy Jamjun.
Yes, I always wanted to be Bubble from Ab Fab, so
Happy
Pride.
What do you sing for us, though, Archie? We want to do a little bit of Whitney, please.
What? Ah, that's my Whitney.
You didn't break anything, didn't break it well. And then also Regina Stoops.
Yay! Thank you, Claire. Thank you, everyone. Happy Pride! Woo! We'll run around the block. Have a parade. Woo! All right, thank you.
I'm off to my Pride. Hope you are too. I'm going to march around my sitting room, and we'll see you all next week. Okay, bye.
6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. It's the newest thing to do. Stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. The distance between me and you. 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. And when I say I'll keep you very close to my heart, it's purely metaphorical. These times are quite historical. So step aside, let's live our lives 6 feet apart.